Hello everyone and welcome to this next video in which I'm going to be talking about the recently announced Nexus 9 and Nexus 6, and I'm going to be giving you a few thoughts on what I think each of these devices has to offer to people and where I think that Google is going by offering both the Nexus 9 and the Nexus 6. So firstly, the Nexus 6 is Google's new smartphone for 2014. It's also one of the first Nexus devices to have a 2K display, and I think that Google's added that into this device so that developers can start developing their apps for a display of that quality and size. It's also 6 inches, and I think that Google needs to address the phablet market as larger phones are becoming the norm and phones are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I think that Google needs to compete with competitors like Microsoft and Apple, who have recently announced their own larger phones. So I think that's why the Nexus 6 is a 6-inch phone with a 2K display. Also, the specs in the Nexus 6 are top of the line, and one of the most contested points about the Nexus 6 is its price. The last two Nexus phones have been relatively cheap compared to what they offer, but this one is going to be offering highest end specs possible, but it will also demand a price that is also very premium. It's going to be $649 for the 32GB model, which is roughly about £407 in the UK, but that doesn't account for taxes and other costs that are included into the price of a device when converting from US dollars to British pounds. But as I said, £407 British pounds doesn't sound too bad for this device, but I would expect it to be about $450 for the 32GB and maybe about $500 for the 64GB, which is not too much more than what the Nexus 5 is currently being sold at. But speaking of the Nexus 5, Google is going to be keeping that round for another year, and I can understand why. The specs aren't too bad. I have the Nexus 5 myself, and I can see that lasting for at least another year. So anyone who does want a budget Nexus phone that hasn't already got one, there is the Nexus 5 available for customers who want to buy that. And it's also going to be on all of the major carriers in the US. It's also going to be on, I can imagine, most of the networks here in the UK. And also, I think that the Nexus 6 is it's a very interesting phone, and we'll have to see how Google develops Android Lollipop over the next few months and possibly few years, so that it addresses phones that are larger than 5 inches, because as far as at this point there is no native split screen multitasking in Android. It's not part of the base code of the system, so it'll be interesting to see whether Google adds that in a point update at some point, which I highly believe that they will, because it will become one of the most requested features for the Nexus 6 in particular, because of its large screen size. I now want to also just address who I think will buy the Nexus 6. And the Nexus program has always been a bed for developers to buy a device and test their apps on, and Google wants to make the Nexus 6 a very business centric device. Because most businesses they tend to consolidate and own and buy where they can to cut costs. I think what Google's done is that they've made a product that attracts to businesses because they can just buy the Nexus 6 rather than buying a phone and a separate tablet. Because of the Nexus 6's large screen size, it can substitute for both devices and therefore cut business costs down. In terms of the Nexus 9, which is made by HTC, I think that is another interesting product. It's changed the aspect ratio, and I think that's what Google wants to push now. It's now 4:3 instead of the traditional 16:9, and that's the same aspect ratio of the iPads. And I think that the Nexus 9 with the front-facing speakers by HTC, which is the boom sound speakers. I think that's going to be it's a very worthy replacement for the Nexus 10, which has been discontinued, and also the Nexus 7, which has also been discontinued and is no longer for sale on the Google Play Store. The Nexus 9 is also an interesting device in that it has a lot of both of the Nexus 6 and the Nexus 9 share quite a similar design language. It's plastic with metal trim, the buttons are metal, they both have front-firing speakers, and I think that what Google wants to now do is present both of these devices as a device for everybody, so for consumers, businesses and enterprise, and over everybody and developers. Everybody can get these devices and use them. So there's just my thoughts on the new Nexus 6 and Nexus 9. I now want to know what you think. So if you like this video, please hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, please also subscribe to my channel, and if you want, and I hope to see you all in a future video, and please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you and goodbye.